house instead of hard ones. And so I said, so? We still don't know why I'm exhausted. He said, that's fine. I said, I'm just chalking it up to long COVID. He said,
5 o'clock.
I wouldn't argue that.
But all just coming this way.
Virtually every system in my body being tested with or without stress has resulted in.
How's Ryan doing?
Good. I was just looking like, am I balding on the back? No.
I'd be surprised if you were. The number of people who are pulling at your hair.
No, it was interesting to see the back of yourself while you're standing here. It just throws you off a little bit. How's German?
All right.
Usually I have a hard time on this evening.
Hi. All right, it's now 11 o'clock. Thank you all for being here. This is our work session on safety for all users, and before I just turn it over to our top-notch team, I just want to kind of give a brief background as to why we're having this work session. So, you know, as a commission, we've made it really clear that we prioritize safety, and we've been doing a lot of really great things in this field and over the last year. And we really want to come up with an actual formal plan about what are we doing and catalog what's been done, where we're at, how we're making progress, and then what are things that we're looking to expand into to increase that safety and go the next leg. So this is our first work session specifically on this topic, and we wanted to cover what are we doing right now, and we'll refine a few more things at a later work session. So just really excited to kind of kick things off and have our staff start us off right. So anyway, over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, President Pickering, Commission, and really on behalf of staff, we thank you for your leadership on this topic. If there's anything, I've been here 13 years, and if there's anything I've seen that staff really cares about, it's providing safe infrastructure. And so this is a great opportunity to continue that conversation, to review some of the great tools that you all have given us and the impact of those, and to kind of talk about where we are now and moving forward. For the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services. I am pleased to be joined by Jennifer Berenger, Deputy Director of Maintenance, and Diane Bevins, our Manager of Capital Projects. As you can see, this is a division or a district-wide focus, and so we're grateful to be supporting your guys' initiatives. But I wanted to start out today just kind of recognizing one truth about safety. While ACHD is responsible for the infrastructure, we can't do this alone. It does require partnerships with law enforcement agencies to ensure that safe infrastructure is being used properly, as well as education, which ACHD does have some role in, but also we partner with the driver's education, with Safe Routes to School, with really trying to ensure the education of all users is done properly. It's only when all these things come together do you really have a safe transportation system, and that's really, we just wanted to start out with that recognition. So as we've looked back over the last number of years, really it's pretty incredible the number of things that the Commission has provided to staff direction on that has really helped encourage and provided direction for how we can address and make the system safer. You know, beginning with the level of traffic stress, our performance measures, that has helped really give us the tools to be able to look at the system holistically and see how it's operating for anyone who's using that system. Further, when you look at the Commission's adoption of PROAG as part of our transition plan, that really reinforced the importance of providing safe infrastructure for all users regardless of their ability. And that when you then bring in the multi-use pathways and the impact of that on providing an all ages and abilities type of system that really meets those needs. Really, the commission has provided a lot of direction points, and I'm sure there's more that we didn't even put on here, but there's a lot of direction points that have really had an impact on what we are seeing now in the field and what staff's able to use.
Okay, so as a review, there's a list of a large number of innovations that we've incorporated into our projects as we design them for construction, through the capital projects department here, and then also through operations, through our rapid implementation projects, policies, and then just our everyday activities, like looking at what we do that's part of normal operations, and how we can incorporate these innovations and the focus on safety into our activities. And as you can see, a lot of these came from the direction from the commission or ideas from the commission, and this is how we're implementing those. And I want to go over a few examples and success stories. This is Roosevelt between Rose Hill and Emerald. This project was fully designed right about the time the LTS guidelines were adopted. So we delayed the project a little bit. We took another look at it, and I think it turned out to be a better product than we had originally designed by adding this protected multi-use pathway along the east side, which we didn't have that in the original design. Eagle Amity to Victory. This was our very first arterial project that we designed and built with the multi-use pathways on both sides. And I think it turned out really great. Also in the photo, we have the PHB crossing Eagle Road at the City of Meridian's pathway system. And then Kootenai Orchard at Vista, this is on everyone's minds. We just had the ribbon cutting not that long ago. Again, a great success story. This started with one of our enhanced concept designs that works really well for these very unique types of projects. So the neighborhood was very involved. We had a lot of public involvement, and again, I think we're all very excited about the results here. And this is an example of our Going Once maintenance strategy. So this is a typical. These segments were chosen based on the pavement maintenance need. The photo on the left is Roosevelt, Emerald to Irving, and we were able to fill in a sidewalk gap on this project. And then the photo on the right is Spalding, Philippi to Orchard, and we were able to add bulb outs and increase that crossing safety in several locations on that project as well.
This next project showcases how we are leveraging our chip seal program and taking advantage of that clean slate that we provide with chip seal to evaluate the lines that we paint on the roads. In this case, this was 16th State to Hayes, where the roadway was narrowed, and that afforded us the opportunity to create a little more delineation between the bike lane, and we've also installed the additional physical aspects to that protected bike lane area. This is a great example of citizen engagement. So this particular citizen spends a lot of time, his presence is pretty frequent along this roadway, along this sidewalk, frequent traveler. Let us know about an area that we could improve on. Our maintenance crews went out, cleared the vegetation from the area, made the sight triangles a lot better, and then our traffic team came out and installed the PED push button that was more in reach for this citizen. So great engagement there, and you can tell just the smile on his face kind of tells the whole story. This is Maple Grove at Victory.
So, the smile on the face of the citizens is important, but it's also fun to see the smiles on the faces of our staff. At the Commission's direction, we began the LPI initiative earlier this year. to expand widely the use of those. This was the first LPI installation at Ustick and Meridian. Really what those faces are is recognition that they're just starting a fun journey. So, but this was another one of those examples of that impact that's being had with some of the policy and directives that have come down. So pivoting now into some of the ongoing efforts, today on your agenda you have another policy discussion and consideration for adoption of the access management policy. Access management has a huge impact on safety for vehicles. Our roads that don't have great access management are some of the ones where we have the greatest number of crashes. And so today's conversation's a good one on that topic. Next week will be the proposal for the first adoption of a pathway policy within our development policy and giving the tools to staff to implement that. While we've been able to implement that on the capital project side, we haven't had the tools to do that from the planning side, or from the development side. Speed management, we'll have a draft proposal back to you next month, reviewing. We've taken the information that's been given and made some revisions. It more or less has been rewritten, Commissioner Hansen, and so we trying to bring a good policy there for your consideration on how to do that and widen the use of speed management. And then just in the beginning stages of discussion on vertical elements and how we incorporate that into our policy. But recognizing infrastructure is not the only piece of all this. Just want to highlight some of the great work our communications team has done to get out the word on safe operations, to ensure that from everything from the FunCam video campaign on Let's Get There Safely that's gone out, as well as really highlighting a number of different things throughout the year when they're most relevant to ensure that safe operations are continuing. So I want to highlight some of the wonderful things that have happened and thank the Commission for its support in this area. Really providing the resources is what makes it all possible, and both from a budgetary as well as from a staffing perspective. While we've been, a lot of capital projects has been able to remain intact in the integrated 5-year work plan process, and really those projects have grown. And really what we've tried to do this last year is really take a look at operations and how do we make safety the top focus of our operations and maintenance perspective, and how do we incorporate that and leverage that resource in a different way to be able to invest more in this area. So from additional staffing, with the stand-up of our access and mobility team, some additional resources in maintenance and traffic operations, we now have the ability to send out 2 signal construction crews, where just with the addition of 1 additional person, a lead there, so that you can have 2 teams instead of just 1. So that expands that ability to get more done quicker. Really, in the realm of safety, that's always the goal. If it's the right thing to do, you want to get it done as fast as possible. As well as traffic operations engineering and helping that LPI initiative move forward. The special project team, you've met Paige and Kelly. Those 2 came out of their original roles, which has spread that workload on other staff. But really what you can see from that is the impact of having dedicated staff working on one task. And you've seen 30 additional LPI completed this year because of that group who's dedicated and getting that working forward. I've already started to see some of the product, and as we're looking at all the rest of them, and there'll be some that we're able to move forward faster, some that will take a little bit more work, and so we're pretty excited to see that impact from them. Last week, the director talked about the One-Stop Capital Projects Division, really where we're going to combine our construction team that's been under my group under planning and projects. So you have planning, design, right-of-way construction all under one leadership. We believe there's efficiencies to be gained in that. And really that combination of seeing the original intent come through fruition on construction. And then the rapid project strategy that my division's been working pretty closely on this last year, and want to talk just a little bit more on that. So when we started this process, we asked the question, when we talk about rapid projects, what does that mean? And wanted to just kind of highlight this. First and foremost, these are operational improvements. These are low-cost things that we can do, from sign, from striping, from signals, from relatively minor changes from an infrastructure perspective that can have a big impact. To keep them rapid, we set a timeline, said they got to be able to be done in a year. From design, all phases have to be done from identification to completion. To help with that, we set the rule that they need to be in right-of-way we already owned. Right-of-way takes time. It really does, and we believe that there's enough projects out there that we can rapidly implement that those projects that do require right-of-way, they go through the integrated 5-year work plan and that staff and that process there. And then this last bullet we believe is important is that public support's explicit or implied, really that this solution's obvious, right? Now, there have been projects that we've done under this that have not necessarily been publicly supported. We hear after the fact, but those are the ones that we bring to the commission to make sure that we're on the right track when we do these types of things. And want to make sure that that when we go in and implement these things, there's a clear reason. Whether even if it isn't publicly supported, that there's a clear safety reason for why we do this, and it's important. So there's just some examples of the types of projects that we really look at, and the team is always looking for more. But highlighting, when we started this process, we set the goal of completing 100 projects this year, and hey, we did it, yay! And really, but that's come with the support of the commission, and a lot of these have come without a lot of financial resources needed. We were able to do them with our existing staff, with equipment that we have, with things we have on hand. But as you can see in the number of safety projects, LPI's played a big role in that, and that's taken that dedicated staff to get that done. We've had some speed reductions, some flashing yellow arrow changes with the red before PED that we've been able to put in. That's a lot of those signage and signals. There's been some sidewalk gaps filled. Small ones, these were through our Safe Sidewalk program, but there were some sidewalk gaps that we were able to fill. We've also done some operations projects. These would be more drainage solutions or cooperative projects that we do with development.
Brian.
Yes.
Sorry to, just really quick question. I think you can go back to that slide. So where would the temporary type projects fit? Because I can see how they would kind of alternate depending on the scope of the project. But if you're thinking, again, just within the right-of-way, and if it meets all these other definitions, if we're trying to get in some temporary, say, just for sake of example, like traffic calming, would this also fall under rapid projects, or would that fall under a different bucket?
Yeah, as long as, again, we go back to that pretty explicit, like the solution, we know what we're doing there, that would definitely could fall under a rapid project. One of the speed mitigation, speed reduction management projects we did was some temporary speed bumps on Frost Street and Star. That's really one of the few that we have out there. We thought we'd test it out, see how well that maintenance was good enough to install those for us. And so we acquired the materials and put that in. So that could be something that's done here. Now, if the neighborhood's going to want to have a lot of interaction into that, that's when it gets a little bit more whether it can really be rapidly done. But if it's something that we're asked, hey, go put up some temporary things here, we can figure out that from our staff.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, staff's constantly looking at these, but a lot of these also come in from the public. These are reactions to you know, a public comment says, hey, there's this issue here, can you take a look at this? Or they come through some of the planning efforts that have been done. Right now, we have 51 safety projects that are already in process that have been identified. Now again, if it's gonna stay rapid, we gotta keep that number manageable. Otherwise projects will get stuck in a queue, right, for a long time. But we feel like we're excited to have that many more already in line coming. A number of drainage and stormwater projects where we've had issues kind of for a long time that we want to address and get those done just internally, as well as cooperating with development and seeing opportunities we can to expand their work and get some projects done. As was discussed just recently, the LPI Signal Initiative. Ultimately, this will probably be an ongoing process, so that's something my staff will continue to be working on for some time. Maybe not quite as rapid, but we're trying to approach it as rapidly as we can. These last two bullets really are just a touch point here, and our thought is to come back and visit with you on these concepts. Really, we see that there's kind of some next steps for how we continue to or would recommend to the commission for how to continue to move forward the safety concept, organizing as an organization around safety, and really talking about our structurally how we're set up to make sure that's a focus, as well as talking about, you know, how do we leverage chip seal and that cycle process to look at some of those sidewalk gaps, and how can we get some of those completed in this process. So thank you, President Pickering and Commission, for the opportunity to just kind of introduce this. We wanted to turn the time back over to Commissioner Pickering for your discussion, and we look forward to your insights in terms of things you want us to be looking at, as well as some of the opportunities we have to moving forward.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, team. So just kind of building off of those last two bullets that you mentioned, like the specific questions that I have for all of you is, you know, we've talked, the Director Wong has talked a little bit about this idea of the safety team, and, you know, we're happy to present, you know, a proposed structure of what that could look like, but I really would love to know if there are any particular ideas or suggestions or expectations of what you would like that safety team to look like, or maybe you know what, maybe you have an idea of what that could look like. And so I want to have a work session dedicated on that one and the zone-based approach, that chip seal idea. So if you guys have, I know it's kind of putting you on the spot, but if you have any suggestions or expectations that you would like to come out of those work sessions, I'd love to hear it. Commissioner Goldberg.
One, and this is for Ryan, in that last slide you had sidewalk gaps integrated with chip seal. If you could tell me a little bit more about what that means, and then maybe we could integrate it into the next work session. Because you mentioned earlier that you didn't want to do stuff like that if there was right-of-way involved. You know, we've got our chip seal 7 years in advance planned when we're going to be doing it. So I'm thinking that if some of these smaller chip seal projects can be integrated with sidewalk gaps, and there's a right-of-way issue, we got plenty of time to plan for it.
Yeah, President Pickering, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I'll field that one. So as we look forward to the next chip seal year, what we usually do is a lot of pre-planning anyway. We're already trimming up trees, we're fixing curb, gutter, sidewalk, doing asphalt repairs. So what we're gonna do is look at how can we address the sidewalk gap issue in those zones so we can get through in a systematic approach, have an area where we can focus on. Because the problem is so vast across the county. This gives us an area where we can, okay, now let's develop a plan. And part of that is looking specifically at where the gaps are, what can be done easily because we already own the right of way, which a lot of them are. And then we can develop that as potentially a project that we can put out to a contractor who has in the past not been interested in doing small sidewalk gaps. But if we bundle it, much in the way we do our manhole cover lifts, we bundle it like that, we think it'll be more appetizing for contractors to bid on it. So it's in a systematic approach of looking through the county while we're doing our chip seal, pre-chip seal areas.
But part of why we're
progress.
Yeah, part of why we're saying it's developing a concept is where, you talk about how do you, some do require right of way. And so I think we're still trying to work through exactly how that would work when you incorporate that into the whole process.
Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, and I think something like that, it's kind of like a wish list thing, but like you say, the reality is, in any given year, how many hundreds of miles of chip sealing do we do? And within whatever area of chip seal we could have dozens of miles of sidewalk gaps.
Every time.
And as a practical matter, there's just no way that we could do that. If we're going to try to put those things together, we need to have some kind of a guideline about, okay, we'll do up to this much. Where we have the right of way, here's kind of the ceiling. Here's as much as we can do with chip sealing in order not to just stymie everything else that we're doing. And otherwise, I think just as a general comment on all of the discussion we've had here today, all of the examples of the things that we're doing and have been doing, many of which have just started within the last 5 years. I think the reality is that ACHD has gone a really long way just on the safety aspect alone. So I think anyone who criticizes this organization as not being committed to safety just doesn't know what's going on, because if you look at nationwide statistics, traffic incidents and problems have gone up in the last few years. But the reality is what we've done for safety has gone up tremendously in the last few years. So clearly the cause is not related to what we're doing or not doing. It's other things, other factors that are primarily forcing these things. So in any case, kudos to all of you for what you're doing.
I would just add to, building off of Commissioner Goldthorpe's point, and you saw it with 16th and our amazing staff with LATA, for example, right? We were like, okay, hey, do the traffic counts really warrant these are really wide lanes, or we have a substandard bike lane, for example, right? And so I would want to make sure that in that type of assessment, in the zone-based approach, that we're also looking at, we might not have to do like a full deep analysis, but it's like, okay, hey, we noticed that there's a couple of these roadways that are maybe not as efficient as they could be for all users. And so having some type of checklist where it's like, okay, we did evaluate and see a few that maybe we could restripe. And I know we've already seen that with some of the feedback we've got on the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan with Americana and things like that. So maybe then it's also looking at Integrated 5-Year Work Plan comments and saying, okay, maybe that also plays a part into saying, oh, okay, let's keep an eye out for these particular segments of roadway, just to make sure that we're looking at all the things that we need to look at.
Yeah, Madam President, if I may respond to that. Really, a lot of what we've done has been reactionary, right? We're reacting to comments, to crashes that have happened, to different things. There are cases when, through planning, we've been able to look ahead and done some analysis and say, hey, we could maybe do something here. But when we're talking about this concept of organizing around safety, it's how do we establish a structure that we can begin to be more proactive, to go look for opportunities and to engage more, using the resources we have, and getting more done.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, I just wanted, there's a couple points. I think this is tremendous, the movement you made on the chip sealing. Just really this year has been really good in identifying where it is, integrating where the planning team, the 5-year integrated plan team already knows they need to do some things. So there's a way of integrating maintenance and the planning team. And now, we're going to be anticipating each neighborhood we go into with chip seals. They're going to say, you're going to come in here, here's some things, and figuring out so they know in advance, even more so. And we can solicit, okay, here's where we can do some striping, some buffers, so that we sort of have this checklist, and we'll get even more sophisticated as we go in each year, going in probably knowing a year or two in advance. These are the kind of the priorities, because we've already identified them through the neighborhoods and through the planning process. And I think that's really good. And the more the neighbors know that it's coming, they actually look forward to the chip sealing, because the end result is it's going to look a little different. It's going to be safer. It's going to be used differently. Huge kudos to the communications team because, and it struck me as it was traveling, we put up with enormous amount of inconvenience and delay. As soon as they explain to us, these are the safety checks that we have to do, these are all the things we have to do, because in our country, we don't tolerate a few thousand deaths in order to get people efficiently around the country, around the world, by air traffic. We don't tolerate it. And so that's the trade-off. And they explain it to us, and we then tolerate those delays. It may drive us crazy. We sometimes have to sleep in the airports, but we understand that we don't want to be among those few thousand that the system has decided are expendable in order to have an efficient air traffic system. And I think the more people understand, and our communication teams does this, that you don't want to be that person who's expendable in order to have the more efficient, fast movement of people in cars. And so there's that trade-off. And the more people understand, and I certainly saw that with our chip seal, there was a number of them like, oh, they weren't sort of on top of it. They were like, what are you doing? You're taking away my turning lane. Once it was explained, and it's like, okay, this makes sense. I see kids crossing here all the time. I see speeding all the time. Okay, this makes sense. That trade-off makes sense. I understand now. And the more we've integrated that in our communications team, everything is about a trade-off between the fast movement of lots of volumes of cars with human life and the movement of people, so that they can have a free choice, that they can move about in their neighborhoods by other means of transportation. And the other, of course, is fantastic use of the constant use of metrics, so they don't have to be reactive. That we already have the metrics, we already know what's foreseeable. We said these are the conditions that lead to these, that is a contributing factor to a potential crash, potential traffic violence. We have the metrics to tell us that, so we use that in advance. And so being able to use those tools has been fantastic. I look forward to the use of more of the rapid response stuff, and I look forward to sort of an update on sort of what we've got in the tool shed, because now we've approved 2 forms of those buffers on the bike lanes, so it's more than just paint, so that people actually respect that that's not a driving space, that's not a passing lane. Kids need to feel safe, or whoever is cycling in that. That's not an extra lane width, and so just knowing how much we have and how much we can do. My belief is that we've got, now that we've ordered them, there's a whole shed full of those delineators. You showed a photo of some of those. What are those? Zebra delineators. It's like, oh yeah, I have a whole list of those in my district alone where we can put them in.
A whole shed yet.
But that's really good, because then that helps to say, okay, yeah, we're stepping it up so that it's not just paint. It's actually usable space. Thanks.
Commissioner Gold?
Yeah, thank you a lot for the presentation. I think this is really great and really helpful. I think that there's obviously a lot of different safety approaches and things in motion, and an effort to kind of bring those together and create more efficiency, and I think that's important. So I think the safety team is one of those pieces that can really help to do that, so I look forward to a future work session on that. And also kind of setting parameters, as Commissioner Goldthorpe suggested, around the zone-based chip seal, and as you mentioned, 7 years, planning in advance. Maybe there's opportunity in there as well. So I think this is great and really headed in a great direction, and I appreciate the work of everybody to make it happen.
Thank you. I know we're a little over time, but I just want to extend obviously, we're deeply appreciative of all the work that you do and your teams do, and I just hope that you extend that to them, because this is really important work, and I know that, I love that you showed pictures of the smiling faces of our staff, right? I know we all know that this means it's really important to them, so if you can just reiterate just how appreciative we are for their work. And yeah, I guess in the meantime, if you have any specific ideas about the next work session on the zones
We get the slides.
Yeah, for sure.
and the safety team, let me know in the meantime, but we'll schedule it in the next few weeks or so. Okay.
And
Commissioner
Madam
Hanson.
President, tomorrow we have a walk with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee in Commissioner McKinney's district. To talk about all those things on that one segment of Linder.
Remind me, what time does that start?
That's at 3. Yeah, it's right by your house. You should be.
Yeah, I should be able to make that. I've just wanted to clear out a dentist appointment, so I need
It's
to show
showing an integration.
All right, guys,
All those things.
we'll end this and we'll go back to the dais. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we're going back to the pre-commission agenda. So just really quick on the my report. So I've had some brief chats with some of our city and land use partners, and specifically with the city of Meridian, and we're planning a joint meeting. So that'll be coming up. We've had some chats about what that could look like and some bigger ideas that they want to toss around. But specifically, one thing that I wanted just to share with the commission as it relates to the speed management policy discussion and work session. I've heard from cities that they are really excited about seeing this next draft, but they also want to know how and provide a little bit more detail about how do the cities actually are included in certain aspects of this policy. So when we do adjust a speed limit sign, or we get a request from the public about speed limit changes, for example, where throughout the process is the city alerted by that request, and where do they get a say in terms of how we address that request? So I think
it's because there's been a little bit of confusion, I think, about when we do alert them and when we don't. So I think if that could be part of our discussion and we include some of our land use partners to see what they would like to see happen with that, that'll be coming up. So, Commissioner Hanson.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I've had a couple of conversations with the city of Boise folks over the last couple of months about the same thing. And one is to figuring out a system so that they have priorities. We sort of dealt with that when we had the chief of police come in. It's been more than a year, and say these are kind of the priority places where we have speeding issues, and that's some of them arterials. So I think it's important that speed management not exclude arterials, but deal with them differently. So they have their priorities. It's also a resource question, because the more they have to put their resources on enforcement, and those are usually negligent drivers as opposed to, criminal behavior, which they would prefer to put their resources into. It really stretches their resources. I think that's really, really important to have the city's priorities integrated into our policy. So those are the conversations I've had.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson.
Thanks.
And I just want to add too, I've heard from several partners, and I don't know when, I'm not sharing this to like assign, we need to talk about this tomorrow, but just this appetite to kind of look at holistically the entire network throughout the county and saying, we've got some inconsistencies of where we have some speed limits are 45 on a 5-lane arterial versus 35, right, depending on the context and the type of roadway, right? And so been hearing from some of our city partners about, can we have some more systematic, consistent approaches to those speed limits? And maybe we also, as we talk about when we widen an arterial, we are thinking ahead about, okay, this is what the speed limit is currently, and to maintain, to maintain that speed and that comfort of speed, we would need to do X, Y, and Z if we were going to continue to widen, for example, right? So I think like that's a little tweak that we can do in terms of when we present these types of projects, so that the city partners are aware that if we just widen and that's just it, naturally speed's probably going to go up, so that they're a little bit more engaged around, okay, maybe we could look into landscaping medians, for example, things like that, because they're looking to us for those specifics about how we can build in some of those safety elements that keep folks at the speed that the city and the constituents want them to go. So just some really great conversations on that. Now, Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Well, one easy one, I think most of us have heard in the last month or so from the mayor of Meridian that he'd like to see nothing more than 40 miles an hour in the whole city.
Thanks, Commissioner Goldthorpe. And that's it for me, but any housekeeping items or questions on the agenda today? Okay, Director Wong.
Madam President, Commissioners, good morning and thank you. A couple things, rather short director's report today, but first I'd like to introduce Jen from our accounting team. We have a new team member.
Welcome. Thank you. Madam President, Commissioners, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to our newest accounting addition. We're very excited. Chloe Walter. This is really excited because we're rolling busy time. So we're very excited to welcome Chloe.
And we're also very thankful she's here joining our team and such. Commissioners, as you know, chip sealing season has been completed. I'm not going to steal Jennifer's thunder on all the great things that occurred this season. The team in a composite operation did an amazing job, an absolutely amazing job again with some pretty big challenges. The reason I'm teeing this up to you all is that this Thursday at 12 o'clock at Cloverdale, we're having our annual Chip Seal Victory Celebration. You are all invited. And you'll see some of the statistics and meet some of the tremendous team members that made this all possible again. Next week is during my director's report, I'm presenting to you a recap of operations in '23. So we're going to go top to bottom on all the things were accomplished, and I think you're going to be very, very happy with the report going forward. And then finally for today, we had a very important event on Saturday, and that was an anniversary of a 21st birthday for Mr. Steve Price. So we are celebrating that today. I would ask you, with the president's permission, to come on down and enjoy some cheesecake for his celebration. So with that, that's what I have for my director's report today. I can answer any questions that you have.
Are there any
Well, attempt to.
questions?
Yeah.
Our president has a little coughing fit right now. Great, all great. We'll be at ease for about 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Stacy?
Good afternoon. It's now 12 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome folks online and in person. Please join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. And if we don't have any of those requests, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam President, we have had a request from staff, Dave Stewart, our right-of-way supervisor, to remand item 6. So I would move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 6, which I would remand back to staff.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Commissioner Hanson and Goldthorpe. All right, moving on to our regular agenda. We just have one item, and that is Ordinance 251. It's the access management policy. This is a request for adoption. It is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and welcome Mr. Ryan Head.
Thank you, President Pickering, Commission. For the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director, Development and Technical Services. Here today to present Ordinance 251, Access Management Policy Update. This is a public hearing and decision briefing for you all. And just as a reminder, as an ordinance, it does require for and support. I will be presenting today also with our General Counsel, Steve Price, who will have some items for you later on in the presentation. This item has come before the Commission and has been developed in cooperation with you all and at your direction for the last number of months. We've had a number of discussions. We've had a couple public hearings and explored opportunities to incorporate the feedback that has been given during those, and what I can tell you is the policy as it is before you today does include all the feedback that's been given over the last number of months. Included in that feedback was outreach and discussions with our land use partners, with the development community, with our bicycle, or with our advocates or advisory committees, as well as a number of follow-up meetings and discussions, including the public. We've also distributed a number of items that have been requested during that time and made sure that all had access to all the information available for this discussion. As previously was reviewed with you, we've received comments on the policy and just wanted to highlight here the majority of those comments from our city partners were in support. And the comments that were requested have gone into the edits that are before you. We've also met with our development community over this time, received comments from them. Some of their concerns have been mitigated by the federal government, who have adopted PROAC and adopted it at their level. Additionally, the request for additional flexibility in implementation has been incorporated into this draft with the concept of an exception form, and Steve will talk more about that. So again, in summary, the modifications from the last time that you've seen the policy, we did incorporate what was previously the city of Boise, and those have been integrated into the draft, as well as adding 2 additional sections regarding alterations and accessibility exceptions, and direction that those would become permanent record here at the district and be part of our implementation the Americans with Disability Act. With that, I'll turn the time over to Steve.
Thank you, Ryan. For the record, Steve Price, General Counsel, the legal department. In terms of just kind of a background, if you recall, this is, Ryan pointed out, this has had a long, arduous path, starting clear back in February. And in the summer, we received some comments that that this provision on the incorporation of ProWAG into the access management was too stringent. And I think all we did in the prior form was to acknowledge that ProWAG and those U.S. code provisions that were applicable, which in itself allows flexibility, but because of the current concerns that were raised, we met with many members of the development community and came up with language really just copying what the federal rule provides in terms of ProWAG when we run into physical constraints, technical infeasibility, and the remaining safety issues. And so this language that we worked up, we reviewed with them, and they seem very comfortable that we provided that. One of the things that it requires is that if they run into these type of situations in their development that create physical constraints and the like, that they have the ability to have their development consultant seek approval by filing an application on a form and submit that to the district engineer, and then that form would remain a permanent record in the project file, so that we have a record of a facility that allowed an exemption for meeting the compliance standards under ProWAG. When we researched this, we looked all over the country to see if this had ever been done. And as it turns out, this is how other jurisdictions deal with this kind of perception on the inflexibility of ProWAG. In truth, ProWAG is flexible. And this is a system that Sioux Falls, South Dakota has done. And the form for the exemption certification is, that is the form that we'll be using. So this allows a process to get permission for those type of physical constraints and technical infeasibility situations where a developer can come in to staff, present on the certification form to the district engineer and seek an exemption. And so after we reviewed this with the BCA, many of the members, they agreed that this additional clarification was acceptable. And so that is why we made that. And that was, we've done that since the last hearing. We've reviewed it with the commission, and we believe this is, from a legal perspective, the right path to allow the development community to make sure that the facilities that they build are compliant with the ADA and ProWAG guidelines.
And Steve, I mean, we also checked it, we floated this new language also with our ADA community and MIG, correct?
That is correct. I'm sorry, but yes, they didn't object before, but yes, no, we've gone back out after we made these changes, and I don't think we've received any written comment from since then.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve or Ryan?
Madam President and Commission, with that, staff is recommending adoption of Ordinance 251, updating ACHD's access management policy and related sections. I'll turn the time over to you for questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Doesn't seem like we have any questions at this time, so I guess I'll turn over to folks that would like to testify on this issue. Let's go in person. Is there anyone that would like to testify on this issue?
Nelson?
Come on up.
Thank you, Madam President. Commission members, for the record, I'm Patricia Nilsson, 3225 Snowflake Way, Boise, Idaho. First of all, I want to thank you for the effort and the staff for the effort. I'm really pleased that ACHD is addressing access management. In my career, it's always been a near and dear issue. I just have one minor comment. It wouldn't, it may be more a recommendation for practice versus I'm not suggesting any changes to the ordinance text, but I do read all the way to the end. And so the very last sentence gave me a pause, where it says the supervisor must find that allowing such access does not reduce the safety of users of the public rights of way. And I would feel more comfortable and more protective of the agency's liability that determination by the supervisor be upon receiving recommendation from the traffic engineer, the district engineer, a PE, who can look at the geometrics and the technical aspects and provide that written recommendation for which the supervisor can base a decision on that, because safety is so important. And a lot of it is based on very objective engineering standards. And I think if you had that recommendation from a professional engineer licensed in Idaho, that would be very defensible should there be an issue later on of crash or any unfortunate incident. So I'm a planner, you know, I have my AICP. I would not feel comfortable making a decision that something is safe on a roadway. So that's all I have. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Patricia. Any questions for? Okay, makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stacy, is there anyone online that would like to testify?
We do not have anybody that has signed up. Just getting one more. We are good.
Okay. Last call. I know I see people on there, so. All right, well then I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
I would make a motion that we adopt ordinance 251, the access management policy.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
before we vote on this, I'm wondering if we could hear from Ryan or another member of staff in response to the public comments that we heard, especially regarding that very last portion of the ordinance. I don't know if there's a way to call up that specific part that we can look at it while we're talking about it, but I think it's worth.
Well, we do have a motion on the table. I'm wondering if we could move into like discussion, if that's okay. If there's a second to support the motion.
Well, I think ordinarily after public comment, we let staff respond to the public comments before we vote.
That's true.
So,
Steve.
Sure. Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, the supervisor is Ryan Head, and is the deputy director of that department. He most certainly would seek the guidance from the district engineer, would probably confirm any requirements to stamp it. I think it's more just a misunderstanding of our internal organizational structure. I'm comfortable with the language the way that it is, understanding how that department works. I can guarantee you that in terms of access and liability, we most certainly have lots of people on, lots of engineers that would be consulted before in any decision on our access management policy.
so would it be fair to say that the supervisor is normally a PE, but if not, has a staff of engineers that are always consulted routinely in these sorts of matters, and therefore the ordinance specifying that the supervisor approves it implies that sort of advice will be taken wherever needed?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, absolutely. We, you know, if you recall, Gary Inselman wasn't a licensed PE, but as a department, they oversee those individuals. With the final authority, Gary as well as Mr. Head, they have the responsibility to make the final decision, and in doing so, they work closely with their staff in coming up with reviewing the situation and making a professional decision with regard to that. So I'm comfortable with that. We've been doing it for years under Gary, and as well, we've continued that with Mr. Head. But the final authority stops with Mr. Head and ultimately the director.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, there's still a motion on the table. Is there?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Madam President, in view of the comments that the General Counsel has given us, I don't have any difficulty with approving the language as it currently stands.
Thank you, Commissioner McKinney. Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, I just want to express my enormous appreciation for the patience and hard work of the staff. We've learned a lot in this process. We've had 4 work sessions and 3 public hearings and an enormous amount of outreach. We've learned not only about the workings of this policy and its use of federal standards and the incorporation of federal standards, but we've learned a lot about how it operates. And we've learned some lessons about who we are really good at communicating with and who we aren't, and how to improve those processes and to make sure that everybody, all of our partners and advisory groups, feel a sense of ownership and participation early in the process. Huge kudos to everybody. I do want to actually give some kudos to Commissioner McKinney too, because the whole notion of the exceptions form and documenting the exceptions was actually something Commissioner McKinney raised at the very first public hearing as one of the things we should be doing. And so I'm glad that's incorporated into the language of this ordinance. So thanks.
Thank you. I'll say ditto to everything that Commissioner Hanson just shared. Thank you to all of our community partners, our land use agencies that reviewed these drafts and submitted their comments and suggestions. I know this is also, we're all very busy. We all have a lot of things on our plates, and that, added request sometimes can bog folks down. But I just want to also just say thank you to our staff for an amazing job. And to Commissioner Hanson's point, we're learning as we go, and I think we learned a lot in this particular policy, and I've taken a lot of value out of the conversations and lessons that we've had in this process. So just want to say thank you to my commissioners in particular as well for going alongside and learning on access management, something that's not super shiny, but that's really important to the work that we do. So just massive kudos all around. All right. If there's no other discussion at this point, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Moving on to the next order of business is public communications. Is there anyone, member of the public, that would like to address the commission at this time? You have the floor.
For something positive to share. Again, for the record, Patricia Nilsson, 3225 Snowflake Way, Boise, Idaho. I'm a member of the board of the Southeast Neighborhood Association. I just want to thank Edinson and the team that came to our last meeting. I think Mr. Hanson was out of country. And we just really appreciate the focus on pedestrian bicycle issues. I had previously communicated with Edinson. The SENA board in January, prior to me being on it, did get a lot of comments at the annual meeting on ped bike issues from the citizens. So Edinson was kind enough to provide a map that a few of us are going to then take those public comments and try to see if they're already in our ped bike plan or not. And then he informed us that the schedule for updating the SENA plan, I think it's on the runway for next year, is those plans are already 10 years old. So I just want to just say thank you for him and the rest of the staff. Thanks.
Thank you for saying thank you. Yes, thanks for that. Any other folks that would like to address the commission at this time? All right. Well, with that, the meeting is adjourned. We're going to roll into our post-commission work session, and that's the Warm Springs Avenue, Avenue C to Windsong Drive concept update. Mr. Edinson.
Good afternoon, Commission. For the record, my name is Edinson Bautista, ACHD Senior Transportation Planner. In today's meeting, staff would like to provide an update on the Warm Springs Avenue, Avenue C to Windsong Drive concept study. including a summary of the response received during the first public outreach. This item is an information briefing only, so no decision from the commission is required at this time. As part of this presentation, we'll go over the planning area, as well as we're gonna talk about the key destinations along the route. Then present regarding the purpose and goals, as well as the existing conditions, the public outreach done so far, and the results and the top themes that came out of that public outreach. And finally, next steps in the process. In this slide, we present a map of the Warm Springs Avenue from Avenue C to Winson Drive. This project, as originally planned, was the evaluation of the entire corridor, but due to the length of the corridor, the different type of land use, and the different characteristics behind each of these segments, we decided to break down the corridor into 3 unique segments. So Avenue C to Costin Street, then Costin Street to Old Penitentiary Road, and finally Old Penitentiary Road to Winson Drive. Some of the key destinations that we find along the corridor, we have the Adams Elementary School, the MW Market, as well as the Trolley House, the Nanatorium, the Greenbelt, Pioneer Cemetery, the Warm Springs Golf Course. As well, we have access roads to other key destinations along the route, which is, for example, the Old Idaho Penitentiary, the Idaho Botanical Garden, Eagle Rock Park, Kristen Armstrong Park, Table Rock Trailheads, and the Roosevelt Elementary School. Our goals and purpose for this project, we have heard consistently, how high interest of the public. We want to make sure that we identify improvements that align with those neighbors' visions, as well as the regional usage of the corridor. One of our other goals is to recommend intersection crossing improvements that increase connectivity, accessibility, and safety. Upgrade existing pedestrian infrastructure to comply with the current standards in the America with Disability Act. An overarching goal is to identify road improvements that enhance safety for all road users. The concept study started with a comprehensive review of the existing conditions and of the existing condition. This included a review of the roadway cross-section and existing infrastructure, identify current plan and upcoming projects, plans associated with the corridor, a list of current and planned land use, the historic district boundaries, key destinations, drainage conditions, and level of traffic stress, between others. In summary, the Warm Spring Avenue is a 2-lane roadway with bike lanes largely on both sides, with on-street parking also largely on both sides, up to Old Penitentiary. From Old Penitentiary to Winson, it's different from that perspective. With sidewalk with a mix of attached and detached. Attached found mostly on the north side, detached on the south side. This roadway is categorized as a residential arterial. The speed limit was recently changed based on commission direction from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. And with a land use that is a combination of mixed use as well as residential. And any component behind with a historical district designation on between Costin Ave and between Avenue C and Costin Ave. The level of traffic stress for pedestrian facilities changed per segment, with Avenue C to Costin Ave being between LTS 1 and LTS 2, while Costin Ave to Winson Drive mostly finds LTS 4 due to the condition of the sidewalk and frequency of the driveway. For pedestrian crossing, most of the intersections were identified as LTS 2, with some locations being LTS 3. For example, Elm Street and the trail access, and these are due to the lack of ADA ramps, or for the trail access, for example, 35 miles per hour and the lack of illumination. For cyclists, we found the bicycle facilities being at LTS 3 due to a range of factors, including the driveway frequency, heavy use of the on-street parking. For bicycle crossing, we found mostly LTS 1 along the corridor. Some of the related plans and proposed projects are included in the East End Boise Neighborhood Bicycle Pedestrian Plan, Integrated Firework Plan, East End Neighborhood Plan, and Warm Springs Community Center. In addition to this comprehensive review of the corridor and existing condition, staff and the consultant plan to conduct a comprehensive public outreach, which taking into account the corridor's complexity, as well as the high public interest of this project. This outreach included a close coordination with the neighborhood association, interview with stakeholders, door-to-door outreach, online survey, and a series of public meetings. The stakeholders identified for this project including the advisory committees, neighborhood association, businesses, historic district groups, business, land use agencies, schools, school districts, and first responders. Early in the project, the ACHD advisory committees were presented about the project and encouraged to participate in the upcoming public outreach. From February to March, staff and the consultant attended meetings with neighborhood associations like the East End Neighborhood Association, the Warm Spring Historic District, and the Mesa Neighborhood Association, with the purpose of introducing the project, capturing initial input, and promote awareness of the project outreach efforts. Between March and April, we conducted one-on-one meetings with the stakeholders, where we captured initial vision of the corridor, as well as identify areas of concerns and possible improvements. In May, an online survey was released for the general public. To increase awareness of the survey, staff and the consultant conducted a door-to-door outreach along the corridor. With this survey, it follows the same concept as the interview, with capturing areas of concern, identify what the vision of the corridor is, and identify potential improvements. In June, a public workshop was conducted in the Adams Elementary School. As presented in this slide, for the online survey, we received 620 participants, and for the public workshop, we received 97 participants. Staff and the consultant compiled all the public comments and identified the top themes that will be explored as part of the evaluation of alternatives. These themes are not in a particular order, but starting with Warm Springs and Old Penitentiary, we heard a significant amount of comments of interest in the evaluation of a roundabout at this intersection. It was pointed out that there was difficulty with the current traffic flow at this intersection, especially when there's events, as well as conflict between vehicle, cyclists, and pedestrian users at that intersection. With Warm Springs Avenue and Walnut, there was a general consensus from the public that it needs to be improved for all users. At this time, this intersection is a two-way stop with a restricted left turn movement during a specific periods of time during the day, with an RFB in the west leg. The public expressed that the intersection was a key connection to Park Center, as well as parks, Idaho Fishing Game, and access to the Greenbelt as well. For pedestrian bicycle safety, we received comments with the desire to see additional crossings along the corridor, like locations where we have where is currently bus stops, routes to the school, to the Greenbelt, and as well as to businesses. In addition, comments has concerns over vehicles traveling in the bike lane, especially near intersections. There were additional comments requesting more protection for cyclists. Regarding speed limit, we heard a positive reaction to the recent changes to the speed limit, with a reduction of 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. We received comments that even though the changes are generally good, at different times of the day, the new traffic flow does not allow easy entering and exiting of the corridor. There are longer waiting times before gaps appear for the entering and exiting the roadway. In addition, with the new speed changes, the public expressed that there's a need for enforcement of the new speed limit. For parking, we received somewhat of a split reaction on the on-street parking. The majority of the comments from the online survey expressed interest in the removal of parking on at least one side of the roadway. And the second, limiting parking near intersection to improve driver visibility of the oncoming traffic. From the adjacent residents we received, we heard the desire of continuing to see the current on-street parking conditions. Finally, for Warm Springs and Avenue C, this is an intersection that staff believe is a result of the concerns over Warm Springs and Broadway, which was brought up in several instances during the first public outreach. There is concern over the traffic backing up all the way to the Avenue C, and this causing safety issues at this intersection. Finally, Commission has next steps. As part of, in preparation to the second public outreach, we're currently working on the development of the alternatives, which are occurring during this fall of 2023. Then our goal is to go back in front of the public with these alternatives by fall 2023. And then on winter 2024, we will refine those alternatives based on public feedback. And coming once again in front of the public with a third public outreach on spring 2024 with that draft recommendation based on those edits. And finally, in summer 2024, we would come back in front of the Commission for an adoption consideration. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Edison. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, Edison, back in those slides where you had the different configurations, and the last one going out to Windsong was 2 lanes and then a bunch of landscaping on either side. Was there going to be any provision there for either cycles or pedestrians, or is that not needed?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, the slide with the cross section is where it currently exists. So,
okay.
So those are what we see right now, and certainly we'll be looking at those alternatives for bicycle and pedestrian improvements there.
Commissioner McKinney.
Thank you, Madam President. Edison, just a couple of questions. Along with that, those existing cross sections that you showed in the first 2 regions, it tended to show curb, gutter, and sidewalk pretty much throughout. My question is, but of course, in the latter section, it doesn't look like it. It's more like a rural highway. What extent of curb and gutter and sidewalk do we actually have throughout the entire corridor? How much of it has it? Because it looks like a lot of areas where, even though the sort of typical section shows it, in some parts of those regions, it still doesn't have it. What are we looking at, basically? In other words, if we're going to rebuild this, how much of it already has curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and how much of it doesn't, and it would have to be built anyway?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, thank you for that question. For the majority of the corridor, or at least 60% of the corridor, we have sidewalk. Where we see the lack of sidewalk is a majority of Old Penitentiary to Windsong Drive. Certainly, from I think in Martin Street to Old Penitentiary, we see some lack of specific sidewalk. We have an extruded curb with a pathway on the south side of that section after the school or after the MW Market.
Okay.
But so that's one of the locations that we don't have the more conventional type of sidewalk that you would see for the rest of the corridor. But so for the most part, those are the 2 locations you don't see, you see that lack of sidewalk. For the rest of it, we see those 5-foot sidewalks along between Avenue C and Martin Street.
Okay, and what is the overall? What's the right-of-way situation through there? How much right-of-way do we have along that corridor?
Great question, Madam President and Commissioner McKinney. So there's a couple challenges behind right-of-way on this section, especially between Avenue C to Mobley Drive, because it's a highway, it's a historic district section boundaries. So even though we have the right-of-way for any additional improvements, there's that challenge behind the limitations we have with the historical district boundaries and the requirements behind it. Besides that, and maybe I can go back to my cross-section, that way I can give more specific information regarding the right-of-way. So for Costin Ave to Windsong, we approximately 70 feet, about 70 feet, 60 to 70 feet. And for Old Penitentiary, it's a little bit more constrained from that aspect, since it doesn't, since it hasn't, I will have to revise the Old Penitentiary in Wingstop. I don't have the exact number for that, but I think it's a little bit less than that, what we have for cost, for the rest of the segment.
Okay. Then, sorry, this is my final question. You mentioned the speed. We recently reduced the speed limit on this section, and you talked about enforcement. In general, are we finding compliance with the lowered speed limit, or are we finding generally people are still driving like they used to?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, it's a mix of both, I would say. We have heard that that certainly the public has been seeing more compliance, but certainly with the changes, the public, there's a time that takes for of adjustment. So we have seen a mix of both. There's still seeing those drivers that are still driving at 30 miles per hour or more. But I don't think we have done a speed limit study yet based on the changes. But that's something that we're exploring as part of the next steps as well of this project.
Okay. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because, you know, it has been found historically and almost uniformly that people will drive a speed that feels reasonable and comfortable to them given the circumstances. Whether, you know, people can be mistaken about what they consider reasonable and comfortable, but that's what they'll do. And from a psychological standpoint, simply lowering a speed limit doesn't necessarily change behavior. In any event, that is something that we need to keep in mind as we're considering concepts for this and designing this and deciding on speed limits. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to build off of that point, and I think, you know, I know you know this, Edinson, but like making sure that we've got this, you know, the current speed limit, right? This is what we heard loud and clear from the neighborhood, that that's what they would like. So making sure that these designs and concepts will align with that speed limit is really key. And making sure that we're really explicit in that with our neighborhood leaders. My question is, what's your plan on engaging VRT? Because with the Botanical Garden, you know, all the events that go on there and looking to expand service in these really important destinations, I think there's a lot of factors that could go into these types of designs, which would make it a little bit trickier for them to access that. So what's your plan to include them?
Madam President, they're part of our project team, so they're reviewing the plans, they're reviewing the concept as we start working with the public as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Edinson. Commissioner Hansen.
Yeah, Madam President and Edinson, thank you very much. Patience is one of the 7 virtues, I think, and so the neighborhoods along Warm Springs have exhibited probably the most enormous patience I've ever seen since the state highway ceased to be a state highway and it got turned over to a local ACHD arterial, and it still has the state highway basically right away, all that whole segment. So I'm glad we're finally getting in there and integrating this. I'm also glad we're doing it with the tools we now have, as we heard on the presentation earlier on safety. It's complex. One of the things we have a tendency to say is go after the low-hanging fruit. Well, this ain't low-hanging fruit. This is complicated. It's complex for all the reasons you described, and I really appreciate that. But when the Park Center bridges were built, when Park Center was built out, taxpayers paid for that with the understanding that that would handle the bulk of the traffic coming from the Barber Valley. Now, of course, people still see the direct route down Warm Springs because we haven't changed it as just as logical a solution to go down, even though Park Center was designed to handle it. And we saw that on our walk with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee a couple months ago. The one thing Boise is moving forward and investing quite a bit in the rebuilding of the Warm Springs Golf Course, turning it into a community events center. It borders a significant chunk of property along there. We really need to integrate our design, and if there's an expectation that Boise will pick up some costs and there's right-of-way issues, we need to do that now as we're doing this part of it. I think it's critically important that the transition point at Windsong is huge for bicycle commuters. There's a huge volume, and it'll continue to grow, of bicycle commuters that use the Greenbelt. They split at Warm Springs. Those going downtown go along Warm Springs if they feel comfortable riding in traffic. The rest then use the Greenbelt, but the Greenbelt splits. That goes to the south along the river. Warm Springs, of course, goes to the north and into downtown. And that's why it's absolutely critical that we have the protected bicycle facilities on Warm Springs from Windsong forward. That then reminds us that we can't really provide that protection on the next segment underneath the cliffs at Warm Springs Mesa. So working with the city of Boise to make sure that segment of the Greenbelt is not like other segments of the Greenbelt. In fact, it is a multi-use path to deal with the complexities of trying to get pedestrians and bicyclists some volume, high speeds of bicyclists on that segment. But that's the point where it splits. So we need to make sure we have that facility. So I hope the designs show options on how to do that, even if that is then going to Boise and saying, we need your help in order to make this accomplish this. So that's a critical piece I hope we see in the design is the protected bike facilities from Windsong. It does go in front of the golf course. You've also got front-on housing on the other side of the road. We've got a really great bike path from Warm Springs Mesa and Barber Heights, or I think Barber, whatever it's called, Boulder Heights. We designed that hill, I think, really well. There's a bike lane on the uphill and then a sharrow on the downhill. So there's even bicycle traffic coming off of that. So that's a critical point in order to provide protective facilities, which we don't have right now. We have right of way, but we mostly have gravel on the side, and to figure out how to do that so that it actually can function as a safe bicycle facilities and connecting in with a bicycle facility that exists now and needs to be protected from Penitentiary on over. So I think that's really critical that we view that as which is why I'm really glad we're viewing this, even though it's 3 parts we're looking at it, we're viewing it as one corridor. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Henson. And I really appreciate the multiple stages of public comment, because I'm sure you're also aware that the Idaho Botanical Gardens having a big campaign, right, to make some really big investments over there and reconfigure some parts of it. So obviously I know that they're going to have the opportunity to provide that comment, but my only request, Edison, would maybe be just to sit down, chat with them to kind of go a little bit deeper in their plans to making sure that these ideas and concepts are truly going to be compatible with kind of their vision. Granted, it's going to be a couple years in advance, but we got to prepare for that. So that would be my only other suggestion.
Absolutely, Madam President.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for staff? Great job.
Thank you.
All right, well, with that, we are done. Thanks all. We'll see you next week.